Good morning, Create Schools. Today I want to talk about a brand new chapter, Chapter 2, the League of Nations. And in this chapter we want to determine whether the League of Nations was a success or a failure. So before we can decide that, we first need to look at the organization of the League of Nations, how it was made up, what are the different parts of it, who was the members of it. Now, hopefully when you hear the word League of Nations, you immediately think of Woodrow Wilson and his 14 points, because this is one of his 14 points. It is also one of the 5 terms of the Treaty of Versailles. So get a piece of paper, pen, and go ahead and write this down. The heading is the League of Nations, and the subheading would be the organization of the League of Nations. Pause this video till you have everything organized, copy this down, and go ahead and restart so we can go on to the next slide. Okay, there is a lot of memorization in Chapter 2 because in order to determine whether something's a success or a failure, you have to actually know all these teeny tiny little parts. It's not a lot of stories, just a lot of little blurbs. And then you memorize the blurbs, and then you can determine whether they were successful or not. So everything you hear, think, does this make it successful? Does this make it not successful? So luckily, we've got a lot of memory words, and the first memory word we have is side. And that helps us think about the 4 aims of the League of Nations. What is their goals? What are they actually trying to do? So for side, it's stop war, improve people's lives and jobs, disarmament, enforce the Treaty of Versailles. Now all of that will be explained later throughout this chapter, and actually some of them will be discussed in Chapter 3. Remember, Chapters 1, 2, 3 all work together. 1 sets the rules, 2 sees how it works, and then 3 actually takes Hitler trying to go against the League of Nations in the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. So the stop war, Article 10 of the Covenant is called Collective Security. Please memorize that name right now, Collective Security. Many people memorize what it is, but they don't memorize the name. And so then when I say explain Collective Security in a 6-point question, or say, Collective Security is one of the things that made the League of Nations fail, they don't know what Collective Security means. And then I tell them what it means, and they're like, oh, is that what you meant? Okay, so I'm not going to tell you what it means right now. You will get it later, later on. But just remember, that is one of the things. I believe it's actually in the next video what collective security is. So write it down, knowing that you're going to learn it more later. So then it discourages the aggression from any other nation. So basically what they try to do is make sure all the other countries are behaving properly and behaving nicely. Okay, the next thing, the I inside, is improve people's lives and jobs. So they encourage cooperation in trade and economic and social agencies. So encourage means, so discourage, encourage are the opposite. Encourage means to, try to get people to do it. Cooperation is working together. Economics, make sure you know what the word economics means. It is extremely important all throughout history and actually all throughout your life. When you hear the word economic, it deals with money. Okay? Money, economy, how everything works. That's your economics. So they also improve living and working conditions in all parts of the world. So when we look at the committees in this video, or the second half of this video, we'll be talking about improving people's lives and jobs. Now disarmament is the D inside. Disarmament, so if you have arms, that means you have weapons. So disarming means that you get rid of your weapons. So disarmament means to have less weapons. And that is one of the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, especially that, Germany had to disarm all of those big things. If you hopefully just review in your head really quick what Germany had to get rid of. If you don't remember, take a look back in Chapter 1. And enforce the Treaty of Versailles. So we've got our 5 terms of the Treaty of Versailles. One of them is the League of Nations. This is what we're discussing. Then we have the other 4 terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Disarmament is one of them, so you should go back and look and see what the other 3 are to just refresh yourself so you know what we're talking about. Again, like I say, you need to know all chapters, all 1, 2, 3 kind of work together to be able to understand what is going on in the world or in the past. Okay, pause your video here. Make sure you have these notes, and when you're ready, come on to the next slide with me. Okay, the membership of the League of Nations is very important to understand. Again, it's Woodrow Wilson's idea with his 14 points. We've got um, two political cartoons right here that you can take a look at and find out. On the left side, it says right here, President Wilson, or it's called Overweighted. President Wilson says, "Here's your olive branch. Now go get busy." And the dove says, "Of course, I want to please everyone, but isn't this a bit thick?" So if you look at that olive branch over there, so an olive branch is a sign of peace. Okay, it says League of Nations right here. And this is the dove. A dove is also a dove of peace. This is Wilson right here, giving this huge, thick olive branch. So the first thing you have to think is, can this dove actually carry this weight, this heavy weight of the League of Nations in its mouth? And it's basically symbolizing, that although it was a really great idea, is it too big, is it too heavy, that it's not going to actually be able to get to everybody? Okay? So then we have this one over here. It says ready to start right here on the bottom. It has the new order of things here. This says the League of Nations. Then we've got our big three in this airplane. And this sign over here says to disarmament and the abolishment of war. Okay, and so they are getting ready to fly off into the new world order of things and leave the old order behind. And this is kind of saying, okay, this is a good one. We can do it. Okay, so now let's take a look at who are the members of the League of Nations. We had 42 countries who were joined at the start, and then by the 1930s there were 6 of them. Our leading members were Britain and France, surprise, surprise, and they were helped by Japan and Italy. So again, we've got our big three, Britain and France, and then we are helped by Germany and Italy, and occasionally in these political cartoons you see those 2 countries popping up. We'll discuss these 4 countries later. They become our permanent members. That'll happen later in the video. But here's the surpriser. The USA did not join the League of Nations. Okay, so Woodrow Wilson, whose 14 points make the League of Nations as part of, he lost the election. Okay, the Republican Party took over. So Wilson was a Democrat. The Republican Party took over, and they're like, yeah, we don't really like this Treaty of Versailles thing. We don't really want to be part of this League of Nations. We just, we don't want to do it. And so they start this idea of isolationism. Isolationism means that the country is going to be on its own by itself and not worry about anything else. We'll actually talk a lot more about that in Chapter 10, and oddly enough, Chapter 10 will be our next chapter. So just keep in mind, the United States didn't join the League of Nations. So think about that. These people are the ones that started, and yet they don't even join. That doesn't sound really good. Okay. The USSR also did not originally join the League. In 1919, they had the Bolshevik Revolution, and they turned communism. Later, they joined in 1934 when they do decide that they want to be part of the whole group. We'll discuss that more later also. Germany was not allowed to join the League of Nations. It was basically a punishment for them causing World War I. They said, you guys are not very peaceful. Since you are not a peace-loving nation, we don't want you in this group, and you cannot join us until you can prove that you can be peaceful. Then in 1926, they proved that they could be peaceful, and they joined, and they left again in 1933. In Chapter 3, we'll discuss why Hitler left. Again, like I say, Chapters 1, 2, and 3 are all combined. Chapter 3 is basically taking place in the 1930s with Hitler. Chapter 2 is the 20s and 30s. So we'll discuss why he left when we get there. Japan left in 1933. So actually Japan left before Germany. And Japan left after the Manchuria crisis. Again, that will be discussed in Chapter 3 as well, what the Manchuria crisis is. Just to let you know, though, it is in China. So just go ahead and write those things down. Not everything makes total sense now, or maybe it is because we've already discussed all of this and you remember it. So let's go take a pause here if you're not done. Remember, you don't have to copy the political cartoons. You just have to copy what I have typed in here myself. Okay, I'll move on to the next slide now. Okay, now we've got the structure of the League of Nations. We have another memory word. sacrums, or however you want to pronounce that, just to kind of keep in order what it all is. So the first thing we will discuss is the secretariat. Now, whenever I think about the structure of the League of Nations, in my mind I always see the picture that's on the online book, page 30. Now, I don't have the actual book in front of me, but it's going to be around that. It's the one with all the boxes and all the arrows in it. Now, the secretariat is not normally where I start from when I discuss it, but since we've already discussed it, you should have a general idea. The S in secretariat is the secretariat is the S in sacrams. Now, I picked this picture because it has the secretariat right there in the center. Okay? It is basically the glue that is holding the entire League of Nations together. Here we've got our council and our assembly. Here we've got the health organization and a lot of the economic and financial section. There's that word economics again. Make sure you know that means money. Okay, your international labor organizations, all of this. And that secretary is the one that holds that together. On your on your book, it's on the left-hand page, or page 30, and it's right there in the center. It's that yellow box. Okay? Make sure that you know 4 points for everything in the League of Nations. There's all these teeny tiny little things, and for everything you should be able to write 4 points. So if I have 5 or 6 points on the slide, make sure 4 are memorized. Okay, the secretariat, they coordinate the different functions of the leagues. Like I said, they're the glue that hold them together. They're a civil service to support all other parts. So then you think, what is a civil service? A civil service is not an elected official. So if we think about the council and the assembly, those people were elected by the people or appointed by people who were elected. And so those are the governmental people. Where the secretariat is just a normal person. They go in and they apply for a job, they get a job, and that makes them a civil service. Okay? They keep records of meetings and they prepare all the reports, and they bring in experts from all around the world. So let's say the health section needs an expert on malaria. They'll bring someone in and they will counsel them and find out what, so they'll help give them ideas of what they could do, things like that. Okay, next, there were too few secretaries to do all the work. I mean, that's a lot of work coordinating all of this. So often they were slow and efficient, and it took a while to get to things. Okay, so pause here, write those notes down if you haven't already written, and I'm going to go on to the next slide, the C and sacrams. Okay, the C is the council. So when I think about the council, I like to talk about the council and the assembly together as one. The council is the big, I guess that's orangish pinkish color. That's right there in the middle. And the assembly is the light blue color to the next of it in your book, on the online book. The actual book might have slightly different colors, but I think they're pretty much the same. So I want to tell you a little bit about the assembly. The assembly is a huge group of people. Every single nation has a representative in it. The council, on the other hand, is a small group, and they have permanent members. So now we're talking again about Britain, France, Italy, and Japan are 2 of our big 3, plus Italy and Japan, who are also really important in the group. And they're the 4 permanent members. They always had a representative in the council, those 4 people. Then they had temporary members that were elected for 3 years, and those come from the other countries. It never says how many temporary members there are, because the numbers change depending on how many countries are members. So you don't need to worry about how many people there were. Just note that they stayed for 3 years. Now, the 4 permanent members have a veto. Now, veto is really important to understand. What it means is that country could just say no. So they can have all of these ideas, and then they just say, no, not happening. And you go, okay. So if you think about it, your family, if you all are having a nice discussion and suddenly your mom says, nope, not going to happen, it doesn't happen. That's your veto. It's a total stop, isn't going to work. And those 4 permanent members could do that. Um, and the council, they met 4 to 5 times a year, or any cases of emergency, and they met to resolve disputes. So when there's problems, they went ahead and met, try to solve these problems. Okay, go ahead and write all of this information down, and I will move on to the next one, the A in sacrams. When you're ready, join me. Okay, here is our assembly. I just found this picture. I believe this is bigger than the assembly because there would not have been women in the assembly. Those were probably part of the secretariat. Just thought, just give an idea of what the people look like and what kind of clothes they wore back in the 1920s when they happened. Now, the assembly, like I'd said before, is your main big body. Every country had a representation of it. So if you think about, the German government, the American government, or even the British government, you've got your parliament, you've got your Bundestag or Bundesreich, and you have your House of Representatives, and that is your assembly. It's a representation of everybody. Okay, every country had one. So when there were 42 members, there were 42 people in the assembly. When there were 60 countries members, there were 60 people in the assembly. The council is the much smaller group. The people were elected, and there was the stronger one. So that's kind of like your president, your executive branch, your anyway, like the president branch. But the assembly then is everyone is there. Now, the assembly recommends actions to the council. They say, oh, I think we should take care of this. They recommend it to the council. Okay? They're also the people that voted in the temporary members. Okay? Now, this group was only held once a year. It doesn't say how long, so it could be like a week or 2 weeks, but it was only once a year. That means if there are problems outside of that once a year, that's when the council does it. Remember, the council met 4 to 5 times a year or in emergencies, so they did meet more often. Now, the assembly has also another problem. They had to have a unanimous vote, which means everyone had to agree. Okay, if you think about that, that's a lot of people that have to agree. Okay, so if you think about your class, if you got 10 people in your class, it's a lot easier to get people to agree. If you think about the whole high school, got about 60 people, 50 to 60 people there. It's a lot harder. Plus, in the high school, we've got our 5th graders and we've got our 10th graders, and they have much different wants and needs and desires. So if you're trying to figure out like a movie, it's really hard to get a unanimous vote. So you can imagine what happens when you've got all of these people from different countries and they all have to agree. It probably didn't happen very much. Okay, so pause the video right here. Go ahead and write this down. I'll move on to the next slide, the C. The Court of International Justices, that's your bottom left. It's called Permanent Court of International Justices, and it's in a pink little thing right there. That is basically your judges. So I've got your judging weight and symbol up on the left, and there's your person on your right, your liberty on the right symbol. Okay, they are based in Hague in the Netherlands, and they were to settle disputes between countries peacefully. And a lot of those disputes were actually border disputes. So if you think about the Supreme Court or other bodies of law, they set down laws, and then the lawyers have to decide, okay, which, are they obeying the laws, or are they not obeying the laws? And if they're not obeying the laws, they are punished. Well, so in the League of Nations, they set down laws and they settle disputes, but since they're not their own country, that, they could settle, this is what's going to happen, and the people could just say, no, we're not going to do that. So they didn't know if the countries were following their rulings or following the laws that are set down. They're basically setting laws, this is how everyone should work, or disputing, saying this should happen, but they don't always follow it. So it kind of makes it hard to make sure things went correctly or not. Now, I'm going to pause this video and make a part 2 because this one's getting quite long and you're getting quite a lot of information to write down. So I'll let you know when you need to come back and see the pause 2, or the second part. If you have any questions of the first part, please let me know.